All right, we're on a roll with these testimonies. How you liking them so far? Right? So this morning, we're going to hear from Russ and Maggie Widener. Come on up. Maggie, of course, she's been teaching the women's Bible study on Mondays for quite some time. She's a very gifted Bible teacher. Russ has been our choir director. Of course, he's our newest elder, one of two new ones. And we're just going to hand it over to you. I love their story. Here we go.
Okay. I feel like asking Maggie and me to give our testimony in 10 minutes is like giving 10 minutes to Moses to summarize the first 5 books of the Bible. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and was go Elizabeth, and was baptized along with my brother and cousin when I was 9 years old. When in high school, I thought the Lord was calling me to be a minister of music in a Baptist church, so I went to Baylor, a Baptist university. After graduation, I attended Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary for 1 semester, but for a variety of reasons, that wasn't a good experience, so I returned to Baylor to work on a master's degree. After 1 semester there, I had to join the Army in order to not get drafted. This was during the Vietnam War. So I spent 2.5 years in the 1st Army Band just outside Washington, D.C. While there, I got my master's degree in trombone performance. So from there, I went to Indiana University to work on a doctorate. But after a year there, I accepted a 1-year position at the University of Georgia.
I live with that.
This is our turn now. After that year at Georgia, I decided to move to Los Angeles to freelance rather than continue the doctoral work at Indiana. So after moving to Los Angeles, I accepted a part-time job to start an orchestra and a school of music for Van Nuys Baptist Church. That church was about 11,000 members. On a Western day with the singles department, the singles director made me begrudgingly join a square dance group. You haven't seen me dance. And it just happened that Maggie was my partner. She was there only because a friend had asked her to take his daughter, who had recently divorced and was having a tough time. So Maggie already had 2 little boys, Christian, age 4, and Ari, age 3, but her husband had deserted her while she was pregnant with Ari. She was not interested at all in joining the singles group, much less getting into a new relationship. Since that was 1977 and it was a Western day, I was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and my hair was a bit longer. Picture John Denver. So Maggie kept trying to get rid of me. She thought someone had brought me in order that I could get saved. So when I asked what she did for a living in order to get me to go away, she said, "Anything I can to support me and my 2 kids." So that almost worked. If I could have just backed up and moved on, I would have, but that wouldn't have been polite. So when that didn't work and she still couldn't get rid of me, she decided to witness to me. So after some wonderful encouragement, I said, "That's really neat. I'm on the staff of the church." So after she picked her jaw off the ground, we had a more relaxed conversation. So then I told her my church ensemble was giving a concert the next night and asked if she would like to go for pie and coffee afterwards. So we did that Sunday night, and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. The Lord took over our relationship. We never went to a movie in our dating time. We talked. Maggie made me, for the first time, really start evaluating my life with the Lord. I'd never really studied the Bible. I knew lots of verses and stories and could list the books of the Bible. I believe I was saved, but a baby on milk. The only Bible I'd ever read was the King James Version, so the NIV had recently come out, so I bought a copy of that. As I started reading, it was like I'd never seen it before. Maggie was so on fire for the Lord, I couldn't help but allow the Holy Spirit to drag me along too. It was like the skies were opening up for the first time. Long story short, we dated until April when I asked her to marry me. Then we got married in July 78. But when it occurred to me that I was 31 years old and would soon have not only a wife but 2 kids, I prayed what we now jokingly refer to as the wrong prayer. I prayed, Lord, help me get my priorities straight. The Lord said, okay. And just as we were getting married, I lost all my jobs. I was freelancing with recordings, and the main contractor decided to take his recording to London. I was on a monthly national tour that was supposed to last another year, but it was suddenly canceled. Van Nuys Baptist Church decided they no longer needed an orchestra or a school of music. At first, I was devastated, but then I decided to do what Maggie calls my Isaac on the altar. The trombone and music had been my every thought and goal for many years, even in our marriage. Maggie helped me realize that, so with much trepidation, I told the Lord if He wanted me to lay that down, it was His. He joyfully accepted. So I tried several day jobs, including finally helping manage a chain of cutlery stores. I continued playing various jobs, including the Ventura and Santa Barbara symphonies. And in 1980, 2 years later, I was also the choir director in a small Baptist church outside Los Angeles. The pastor there was John MacArthur's father, Jack MacArthur. He preached just like John. Every sermon was an hour long, and we wondered at the end how he was already finished. We grew leaps and bounds in the Lord there. With my working full-time at the cutlery store and still freelancing, I was working 24/7 and getting really worn out. Anna, our first daughter, was born in September of that year, 1980. A friend at the church knew our situation and finally told Maggie and me we should consider leaving Los Angeles. After much agonizing prayer, we decided to do that. In May, we told our landlord we would be leaving August 1st. I gave the same notice to the store owner, and we reserved a Ryder truck but told them we didn't know where we were going. I had a possible teaching job in Dallas and had applied for another job in North Carolina with no reply. If neither of those worked out, we planned to move to Georgia and work with my father in construction. Then June 30th, and you might notice this timeline, June 30th, I went to a symphony rehearsal, and the personnel manager said she had not received my contract for the year. I told her we had decided to move, and she asked where. I told her, I don't know. I said, if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them. The next morning at 7 a.m., I got a call from her. Her daughter had just graduated from one of the main conservatories in the country, Eastman School of Music, and she was a flutist. But the school automatically sent their graduates job openings all over the world for all instruments. Her daughter was not looking for a job, so she threw the listings in her trash can. My friend took the listings from her trash can at 7 a.m. and told me there were 3 jobs for trombonists. There was one at Wichita State University that I thought might work for me, so I called the school and was told the deadline for tapes and resumes was July 10th, 10 days away. I had one reel-to-reel tape, typed my resume, and mailed them July 3rd. July 12th, I got a call saying that from 50 applicants, I was one of 3 to be invited to audition. I would be the first to audition the next Monday. The next day, I realized I'd lost my mouthpiece, So I dug out an old one to use. No brass player ever loses his mouthpiece. I think an angel stole it. After practicing 5 hours a day for the next 6 days, I left for Wichita. When I called the travel agent, I'd asked for a flight originating from Burbank Airport. I was told there was no flight from that airport, so I'd have to leave from LAX. When I got to the counter at LAX that Sunday afternoon for a 3 o'clock flight, I was told that flight was out of Burbank. So I had to wait for the next flight from LAX, which would arrive at 1 a.m. instead of 9 p.m. The following morning, I was picked up for my audition and interviews at 7. The day, including my mouthpiece, went well. The following Thursday, after the other candidates' auditions, I received a call offering me the job. I called Ryder and told them we were going to Wichita. 2 weeks later, August 1st, we left for Kansas. Before we left, our friends threw us a party and passed the hat to help with expenses. When we left, Anna was 11 months old. We loaded the 2 boys, Anna and a black Labrador Retriever, into the truck and our yellow gremlin. When I turned in the truck in Wichita, the bill was to the penny. What was in the hat? Since then, he has brought us through so much more than we can even begin to describe here, including my cancer and Ari's death from an overdose. While unmarried in Los Angeles, I had told my friends I'd probably never get married or teach in college. If I did get married, I would probably never have children. And if I did teach in college, I would never be an administrator. I spent 37 years on the faculty of Wichita State University, the last 8 of which as director of the School of Music, overseeing a faculty of 50. We just received a call from one of my sons that his wife is now pregnant with our 17th grandchild. Never tell the Lord never.
Okay, well, just like the song we sang, okay, thank you, today about the Lord's hand on us, I suppose it would be safe to say that the Lord has had his hand over my life, my entire life, really. And my first Bible teacher, he would have teased me and responded to this with saying, yes, sometimes holding a hammer and other times holding a life vest. He actually called me a hole in the head. And then he added, you have actually, Maggie, 7 holes in your head that are always receiving information every day. And that tells you that there's a message being sent. Are you listening? So he didn't really know me from my childhood or anything, but he said this because this sweet 80-year-old man met me when I was 25 years old, and after I truly had become a real born-again child of the Lord. And as a child, I grew up in San Fernando Valley, California, and my parents took me to church, which I loved. And I remember the Sunday school teacher would have to keep explaining to me that every time they asked kids if they wanted to come up and ask Jesus into their hearts, she'd say something like, well, Maggie, you don't have to keep coming up every time that we ask, dear. And so, whatever, I was an energetic kid from the get-go, always thinking, always talking, always driving everybody nuts, trying to entertain my family with stories and songs. And I suppose that was because my grandfather was an early motion picture producer in Burbank, and his movies I could watch in a little theater in Disneyland, which opened shortly after I was born in 1952. And yes, I'm that old. But I wanted to follow after my grandparents. Even 2 of my grandmothers had been actresses, so it seemed the right thing to do. But as I grew older, many things which in families can arise as problems, they became pretty obvious that there were some difficulties in our family. And my parents began to drift away from going to church, and of course affected their drifting away from the Lord somewhat. And that also affected me greatly. And particularly at a time when I needed the most, which were my teenage years in the 60s, in California no less. So in those days, I had taught myself to play guitar, and I wrote songs. That's what we did in the 60s. And at the same time, I had so many friends shoving books into my hands that were, telling about every new cultish thing there was in good old California. And they were books about Maharishis, Hare Krishna, Scientology, Theosophy, metaphysics, and being a reader, I read them all. Fortunately, I found that they were like a black hole of information going nowhere, which was not helping me to find my way either. And the paths that people or my friends were taking, they were just not obviously what my heart was needing. And I knew this. Deep inside, I knew this. But I just couldn't process why it was so. So actually, if you had asked me then, of course, who Jesus was, I would have said, he's the Son of God. And he died for me, for my sins. And I even prayed during those times, often crying out to God. But it was me always doing the talking and never doing the listening. So I had neglected during those years reading the Bible. And though there had been probably more scripture that had been planted in my heart through very faithful Bible Sunday school teachers when I was a kid. But I guess that's probably why my Bible teacher when I was 25 called me a hole in the head. But anyways, obviously I'd been trying my whole life to navigate my life without God's map, which doesn't go well for anybody. So I got married when I was 21 and stupid. And as the saying goes, of course, sin makes you stupid. And so I found that out very clearly when a year and a half later, I was deposited at the front door of my parents with one suitcase, a 6-month-old son, which was Christian, many of you know, and I was 2.5 months pregnant to boot. This got my attention. So probably another reason my Bible teacher also called me a hole in the head. So or rather God most likely, put me back under my parents' hands, who were now faring better and a little bit more wisdom from their life's challenges. And they stepped in to help me at a very vulnerable time since I was pregnant and alone. My father even volunteered to help me do natural childbirth. And that actually went a long way to repair a fraying relationship that had suffered during my teenage years. And after my second son was 10 months old, I began working for an entertainment attorney, and one of his partners got me an audition with a record producer to try to help me to get into the industry. And this was not something new for me at the time. I'd already done that and been there as a teen. But for your sake and your benefit, I have left that part out of my story. But a nutshell is that environment was just such a dark world that I just chose, or God helped me to choose to turn away from it. But that was one of the better unstupid things that I managed to do in my life. But the point is this, is that at that time, I was still playing guitar and writing songs, and that while I was there at that attorney's, I got a divorce. So during that time, my boys and I were living now on our own in a 2-bedroom house. that was provided for us by one of my mother's friends, which only cost $75 a month. And it was a really nice house. So God was at this time, I knew, in it, and he was beginning to move quickly into my life in a very visible way. So during that time, I have to say, though, I was feeling so much all of my failures. And the truth is, I was lonely for God, but I didn't understand that it had been my sin that was coming between us. And I felt like I was just floating on this vast sea of nowhere. So the nice thing was, at least at home, I had this nice little reel-to-reel recording system set up so that every night after I got back from work, tired and stressed and all of that, I could pour my heart out and release all these hurts and all these concerns that I had in my soul that were really beginning to germinate there. And I just didn't get it. But one particularly difficult day, I came home from work feeling very depressed. So after I put my boys to bed, I opened a bottle of Jack Daniels that somebody had left at my house and liberally helped myself and began to play. And I played all night until I exhausted myself and finally fell asleep. In the morning, when I got up, I rewound the reel and listened to the tape. And at the very end, I heard words and music coming out of me that I didn't even remember singing or expressing. So I was shocked, and as I heard my voice singing these words, it was, "I don't know if you do, but you're going home again. You can't see that you are free, but you will go. You will go. But now you're lost in your soul. You're so lost in your soul. And when I looked into your eyes, I saw that you were one who could grow, and you will go." I sat there, guys, because it wasn't me. I felt like the person in that song that I was singing to I was the subject. And God was exposing to me at that time, which none of these things clicked, that I was the needy one. And he was exposing my sin. And so I just wept. And right after this experience, a guy I played guitar with took me to a church that was actually a cultish church. And the people told me there, "You're not saved." And I'm going, "Yes, I am." But the thing is, they were saying a lot of other weird things too, like they were the dry bones in Ezekiel that God was raising up for the last days. And I knew that was definitely not true, but I did not know enough of the Bible to refute them. So the guy told me if I didn't believe him, go home and read my Bible, and that's what I did. I got my Bible out, dusted it off, opened it randomly, and it fell open to 2 Timothy 3, 1 and 2. And most of you know that one. It's, "In the last days, people will be lovers of self, boastful, arrogant, just lovers of money, proud, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy." And it was literally jumping off the page, and my heart cried. Inside, I knew that this was me, and I remembered the words, "You're so lost in your soul." And I was alarmed. And the wonderful thing that happened was it burst through with fear in my heart finally, fear of the Lord. It takes that wonderful, healthy fear of God and the reality of his existence and his presence, where I fell down on my knees and I said, "Oh God, you're so right." And I didn't see it. How did I not see it? If I've never given you control, please take control of my life now. And then it was like I was on fire. I guess God had some serious dross to burn in my life, and everything changed that night. I changed friends, I changed activities, I jumped into a seniors Bible study where I met the Bible teacher, and then I met Russ, my future husband. And the main thing that changed for me, though, was my hunger for the Word. I had this great hunger for the Word, and I literally heard the words come into my mind, and I heard the Lord, or the thought, say, "Let your mind become my garden and a place for my Word." And so therefore, all my old songs, all my old writings, everything that I had done became like ashes to me. And I even put away the guitar. I didn't really want to do that anymore. I lost the interest of it. But what I found was that I wanted the song of God's Word. So I asked him, "Can you let your Word become my songs?" And that's what he did. I think he gave me the blessing of helping me to want to be a living song of his life. So anyways, that's our story.
Thank you, Russ and Maggie. You know, I think they might have shared a couple of years ago. I had them share on a Sunday morning how they even got here. And they were in Kansas, and you know, Christian was already here. Their son Christian, who I think we all know, Christian Widener, and we've heard him speak, and you know, he's authored a couple of tremendous books. And he'd been asking, you know, Mom, Dad, come up here, you know, come to South Dakota. And there was a morning where they were in separate rooms having their time with God, and they both heard from the Lord at the same time, move to Rapid now. And I think, Russ, was it you came out and saw Maggie and said, "You didn't believe what I just heard?" And you told her, and she said, "I just heard that too." And then you held each other for a long time, and you said, "Well, God is speaking." And here you are. And we're so grateful you're here. And grateful that you're part of this church family. Because they were going to another one, but Bill Federer happened to be speaking right when they got here, and let's go hear Bill Federer. And they did, and they stayed right here. So we're grateful.